Welcome to the Spirit of Detroit show. My name is Dr. Ural Hill, and we have a great show for you today. You know, we have challenges in Detroit right now. We just got the crime statistics back from 2012, and there were 411 homicides in the city of Detroit. Today, my guest is Tom Staton, Director of Crime Stoppers for Southeast Michigan. He's also a minister of youth at Hope United Methodist Church. Today we're going to look into some of the solutions to the problems of crime on the streets of Detroit. We're going to delve into solving these problems with solutions that you can get involved in. It's going to take a great amount of work and community change to turn the city around. You know, right outside of the building here, there's a statue, the Spirit of Detroit, for whom this show is named. And behind that statue, there's a scriptural quote, 2 Corinthians 3:17, and it says, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. We want that freedom in Detroit. And as a phoenix, we will rise again. Today, join us where we'll discuss these issues in specific dynamics that allow you to get involved.
Recycling Detroit starts with you.
Do you recycle?
Did you know Detroit recycles? We started curbside collection in different neighborhoods.
It's getting bigger and moving to other neighborhoods.
And anyone can recycle here
and here.
What we do with our trash, the reflection of our city. A city that's full of life
and optimism.
And we need to take pride in our city.
It's one small change
that starts a chain reaction.
Detroit recycles.
Hello, we're back with the Spirit of Detroit show. And this is Dr. Ural Hill. I'm talking to my guest, Tom Staton, and we've began to look at Crime Stoppers and some of the realities of what we're faced with here in Detroit, on the streets of Detroit. You know, again, that number, I like to say 411, there were 411 homicides in Detroit in 2012. That was the second highest number of homicides in the history of the city of Detroit. That is the 411 right now, Detroit. Per capita, that makes us the most dangerous city in America.
Murder capital again.
And that is not something that we're proud of. These are things that we have to, the 411 is, the rocks are crying out right now. Yes. We've got to look at ways to solve these issues. Now, the police chief, I saw him on television, and he said it himself. The interim police chief said, this is a problem not just for the police, but for the preachers, for the principals, for the parents as well, and the politicians. So we've got to have a collaborative dynamic when we go to solve these problems. We were just talking about Tom's work as Director of Youth Services at a Hope United Methodist Church. Again, the church has always been the bridge that brought African Americans over. The black church was the place where folks could come together and revel, not just one day a week, but throughout the week.
That's right, in service.
In service to their community. It's the cultural piece that taught us our history. It's the piece where the griots told our story. It's the communication piece where people were educated on what is right and what is wrong. You know, this goes back beyond, you know, our history didn't begin with slavery in America 400 years ago and that kind of thing. Our history began thousands, if not millions of years ago. That's right. And so when we talk about the African bridge that brought us over, it was the place where we could celebrate a value of life. And that value that says, I am because we are. Too often we see kids on the street today who have cold eyes.
Disconnected.
At 10 and 11 years old, they've disengaged, they're disconnected, and they're ice cold. There's many of these kids who've dropped out of school, and 50% of African American boys nationally and 61% in Michigan drop out of high school. 90% of them will end up in the prison system. So we have a great challenge here. I'm going to go back to our guest and start talking solutions. You know, it's important not to live in denial as to what's going on. These kids didn't come from Mars, they're ours. And we have to focus on ways in which we can guide them and mold them and shape them. Even the ones that are out there now, it's not too late. if we're able to reach out.
That's
Let's
right.
go back.
I want to touch right where you were at, though, with the black church, because you are absolutely right. But the black church is in crisis across America. We have declining attendance. We have declining resources, and we're trying to do more with less. Even at Hope United Church, which boasts a membership over 4,000 people, one of the largest churches.
It's a mega church here in Detroit.
But we have issues with getting people to church and their young people to church, and that's an issue. Let me come back with another statistic with Crime Stoppers. You talked about the 411. How about this? We had over 6,000, almost 7,000 tips at Crime Stoppers this year. Set a record for Crime Stoppers this year.
Wow.
Would you believe this is the first year that there are more tips from the suburbs than there were from Detroit?
Oh my God.
The first year.
But that speaks to hopelessness.
Absolutely.
See, Detroit has taken so many hits this year.
Yes.
I'm talking from this table right here that we sit in front of. We've taken so many hits. The morale of Detroit, and that's why we're here. The morale of Detroit has taken hits. But go ahead.
I just want to say, because you hit it right, you caught that one.
Yeah.
I spoke with Luther Keith's conference down at WC3 to, in fact, the majority of community neighborhood organizations.
Okay.
And they talked about the hopelessness and the disconnect even with the police departments and whether they'll even come if they call. These were the cream of the crop as far as your community was concerned.
Yes.
And let me tell you, it tore my heart out. It tore my heart out because we can have a devil's night or angel's night and reduce all the fires and have all the community out.
That's right.
But then we can have 411 murders and many of them want to report a thing.
Right.
You've got to stand up. You've got to speak up, but you got to stay safe too.
Yeah. Even before we close the show, why don't you look right into that camera over there and tell them how they can call in with Crime Stoppers and get involved?
Absolutely. Crime Stoppers has two primary ways, anonymous ways of calling in. Both are easy. One is, of course, and you've seen it on the billboards, the 1-800-SPEAK-UP is the number. And if you Google 1-800-SPEAK-UP, you'll get 1-800-SPEAKUP.org, and you can actually send a web tip in as well. Still anonymous, still coming through with just a tip number that you call in and check on during the week, and they'll tell you whether it was a successful tip or where to pick up a reward, an anonymous reward. That's how the process works. It is totally anonymous. If it wasn't anonymous, we'd be out of business. But before I stop, I want to come back to where you were with the spirit, because the spirit is down. I heard an old story about an old Indian who talked about where the missionary came and said, "How goes it?" And he says, I'm battling every day in my spirit. He says, "Really?" He says, "Yes, my spirit is like two big dogs that I have that fight every day."
Yeah.
And he says, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, I have a carnal side or evil spirit in me. And then I have this good spirit in me." And they fight and they war and they every day. And the missionary says, "Well, who's winning?" He says, "Whoever I feed the most that day."
The dog that you feed the most will win.
That's right. That's why Spirit of Detroit is so important.
Right. And Detroiters, I want to share that, and that's where the church comes in. That's where the spirit comes in.
That's right.
If you have Native American spirituality, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Buddhist, or if you're a Sikh, when you are tied in with something greater than yourself, I don't mean to preach to the choir, then you and that great spirit are the majority.
Yes.
You and Jesus are the majority. You and God are the majority. You're going to win.
Yes.
In the end, you're going to win. Detroit is going to rise from this
Yes,
dynamic.
absolutely. From the ashes. The phoenix.
Right, that's the phoenix from the ashes. We can feel the transformation and change occurring in Detroit. We can see it in the buildings. We can hear it. You said the majority of the calls came in from the suburbs.
Yes.
All right, now Detroit, and one thing I want to lift up is the fact that when you graduated from Michigan, you stayed here.
Yes.
and you stayed in the community you came from. As a matter of fact, you
moved to
stayed,
Detroit.
Moved to Detroit. You
Yes.
got involved.
Yes, sir.
Detroit is not just the 132 miles or 139 mile radius that city proper is in. Detroit is the suburbs. In Atlanta, I lived in Atlanta.
We're the only city.
And it is Metro Atlanta, which
Yes.
is 2.5 million Atlantans.
Los Angeles.
In
It's
Houston,
Greater Los Angeles.
Greater Los Angeles.
Greater Houston.
In Houston, there's a 600-mile radius and 6.5 million people who consider themselves Houstonians. I was there for 6 years and in Atlanta for 16.
Yes.
In Detroit metro area is the broader area. So as we come together and as we work together in the greater Detroit, it includes Ann Arbor, it includes Birmingham,
That's right.
it includes Livonia, as we attach that common identity, then not only are we one in the majority with God, but we were one in the majority with all of the people who consider themselves and identify with the city of Detroit. So,
Because as Detroit goes,
the whole nation goes.
That's right.
All right, so this is the Spirit of Detroit show. I thank you for joining us today. My friend Tom Staton, we got a chance to play intramural basketball at
Yes,
Michigan.
and football.
And football, that's right. Yes, and back in the day. And he's
Championship.
continuing to do the work. Remember to call in Crime Stoppers. Give them that number one more time.
1-800-SPEAK-UP.
All right, and we thank you on the Spirit of Detroit show. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And we'll see you again next week at Friday, on Friday evenings at 7:30 on the Spirit of Detroit. Keep your heads up, Detroit.